Your phone buzzes. You reach for it, half asleep, eyes barely open. Then you see the number, not your alarm, not a text, a number in your bank account that doesn't make sense. You blink. You check again. You are, as of this morning, the richest person alive. For a second, nothing happens. You just lie there. Your brain hasn't caught up yet, but it will. And what it does next is far stranger than anything you'd expect. You'd think unlimited money rewires you instantly. It doesn't. Your brain wasn't built for this moment. It was built for a much older one, a world of scarcity, where the difference between eating and not eating was a matter of hours, not headlines. That ancient wiring is still running underneath everything, whether you're broke or the richest person on the planet. Here's the part almost nobody tells you. Your brain doesn't actually process wealth. Not directly. It processes change. A raise feels incredible for a while. A windfall feels euphoric briefly. But then something quiet and strange happens. You adjust. Psychologists call this hedonic adaptation, and it's one of the most consistent findings in the science of happiness. Whatever your circumstances become, your baseline mood tends to drift back toward where it started. In 1978, psychologist Philip Brickman ran a study that still gets cited in classrooms today. He compared lottery winners to a control group, and in a separate comparison, to people who had recently become paraplegic after accidents. You'd expect the lottery winners to be soaring with happiness, and the accident survivors to be devastated. And right after the event, they were. But months later, the gap had shrunk dramatically. The lottery winners weren't nearly as happy as you'd guess. The accident survivors weren't nearly as miserable. Both groups had drifted back toward their emotional baseline. So what does that mean for you, lying in bed with more money than anyone else on earth? It means the version of you that woke up this morning is still, underneath it all, the same person who fell asleep last night. Same insecurities, same habits, same brain, tuned by hundreds of thousands of years of scarcity, now facing a problem it has never once evolved to solve. Total abundance. Think about what your ancestors actually needed to survive. Enough calories to get through the next season. Enough social standing to not get exiled from the group, because exile back then meant death. Enough resources stored up to survive a bad harvest or a hard winter. Their brains built a reward system around exactly that. Small wins, steady accumulation, constant vigilance against running out. You inherited that exact system. It hasn't updated. It can't tell the difference between I need to find food before winter and I need to check if my portfolio dropped this morning. To your nervous system, both trigger the same ancient alarm. Now here's the twist nobody expects. Being the richest person alive doesn't turn off that alarm. If anything, it turns it up. In 2010, Princeton researchers Daniel Kahneman and Angus Deaton published a now famous study looking at income and emotional well-being. They found that day-to-day happiness rose with income, but only up to a certain point, and then it flattened out almost completely. More money kept buying more life satisfaction, that broader sense of, how is my life going? But it stopped buying more actual joy in the moment. The two things split apart. You could be extremely satisfied with your life on paper and still feel nothing close to daily happiness. That gap is the part that catches billionaires off guard. You'd assume the richest person alive wakes up feeling like they've won. But ask people who've actually gotten there, and the story is different. Harvard psychologist Daniel Gilbert has spent decades studying what he calls effective forecasting, our notoriously bad ability to predict how we'll feel about future events. We think the big win will feel permanent. It never does. The brain recalibrates almost immediately, resetting its idea of normal to match the new reality, and then quietly starts wanting the next thing. So you're the richest person alive. What happens next? Probably not what you'd imagine. Not a montage of yachts and mansions. Instead, something almost mundane. Within days, your brain stops registering the number as extraordinary. It becomes the new normal, and once something becomes normal, it stops generating the dopamine hit that made it exciting in the first place. This is the same mechanism that makes a new phone feel thrilling for a week and forgettable a month later, just scaled up to a level no human has ever tested before. There's a deeper problem too, one buried in the psychology of status. Humans didn't evolve to compare ourselves to some absolute scale of wealth. We evolved to compare ourselves to the people around us. Anthropologists studying small-scale hunter-gatherer societies, groups like the Hadza in Tanzania, have found remarkably egalitarian norms around resources. Hoarding wasn't just discouraged, it was often actively punished by the group. Standing out too much was dangerous. Blending in, sharing, staying roughly equal with your neighbors, that was the safer evolutionary strategy. Which means the version of you that's suddenly richest on Earth doesn't just face a psychological problem, it faces a deeply unfamiliar social one. You're no longer comparing yourself to a neighbor with a slightly nicer car. You're standing completely outside the frame of reference your brain uses to measure success. There's no one left to compare yourself to. And weirdly, that can feel less like triumph and more like isolation. Is that why so many extremely wealthy people report feeling strangely disconnected, even paranoid? Some researchers think so. Psychologist Paul Piff has studied how wealth changes behavior, running experiments where people in richer positions, even artificially in rigged games of Monopoly, started acting differently. More entitled, less generous, more likely to attribute their success purely to their own skill, even when it was clearly the result of, quite literally, being handed more money from the start. Piff's research suggests that as resources go up, empathy and social connectedness can quietly go down. Not because wealthy people are inherently different, but because abundance itself seems to change how connected you feel to the people around you. So here's the uncomfortable truth hiding underneath your first morning as the richest person alive. The money didn't fix the ancient wiring. It just gave it more room to run wild. The same brain that once scanned the horizon for threats is now scanning your bank statements. The same brain that once needed the approval of 40 other people in a tribe now needs the approval of millions of strangers online, or a boardroom, or a headline. The scale changed, the wiring didn't. And this is where the story stops being about billionaires and starts being about you, right now, reading this. Because you don't need to wake up as the richest person alive to feel this exact pattern. You already know what it's like to get the thing you wanted and feel the excitement fade within days. The new job, the new relationship, the number on the scale, the promotion. Each one detonates a burst of dopamine, and then, almost cruelly, your brain resets the bar and starts scanning for the next target. That's not a personal failure. That's 400,000 years of evolution doing exactly what it was built to do, refusing to let you settle, because settling, back then, could get you killed. Knowing that changes something, doesn't it? The richest person alive isn't happier because of the number. If they're happier at all, it's because somewhere along the way, they figured out how to work with that ancient wiring instead of against it. Gratitude practices, deep relationships, meaningful work. These aren't just feel-good advice. They're some of the only tools that seem to interrupt the adaptation cycle, according to researchers like Sonia Lyubomirsky, who has spent years studying what actually moves the needle on long-term well-being when circumstances alone don't. So picture it again. You wake up, richest person alive, phone buzzing with a number that doesn't make sense, and somewhere underneath the disbelief, your ancient brain is already doing what it's always done, scanning, comparing, recalibrating, quietly resetting enough to mean just a little more than what you already have, because the richest person alive was never going to feel rich for long, not because the money runs out, but because the feeling was never really about the number in the first place. It was about a brain built for scarcity, waking up in a world it was never designed to survive abundance in. And that brain, the same one deciding right now whether this moment made you happy, is the exact same brain you had yesterday. Before any of this, before the buzzing phone, before the number that doesn't make sense, it was never waiting for a fortune. It was only ever waiting to feel, for a moment, like enough.